Karen Gibbs, Creative Director of Banyan Boutiques by Northcott, and you are in the group Karen Gibbs for the Love of Boutiques. We're talking about color today. It's on my mind a lot, partially because we're creating collections for 2023. Well in advance. But what we do is we put together a whole bunch of color palettes when we're thinking about collections, because especially in batik, color moves us as quilters. We're moved by the color. We're drawn to a certain color. I tease Barb Wolf all the time about her just fascination for aqua. She'll put aqua in every single quilt if she possibly could. My son has a fascination with red batik. I found that out since he's been working here with us for a little while. So everyone is drawn to different kinds of colors, and it's an emotion, right? It creates an emotion within you. They talk about you paint the walls a certain color for a calmness, or you don't put a certain color in babies' rooms, or all of that kind of thing. So color has so much that we can talk about. I have a few different books that I just love, and they're histories of color and how color was developed and where it was found, and all of that kind of thing. It's interesting. But when we start to talk about color with batiks, we have to remember, as always, everything is hand done. It's not a machine talking to a machine. Like if you pick a paint chip out at Home Depot, right? You bring it to the counter and they mix it, and they plug in the number, right? So it's a standard formula that goes in there. Now we create a formula for our batiks, so we can, when I see a strike off, which is the initial creation of what they think I'm looking for, and I approve it, then they want to make sure they have the same formula to create the production yardage, right? So that you get the same fabric. For instance, if one quilt shop in Nebraska has the Spectrum collection coming in, which is Jessica Vandenberg's collection, and it's due to hit stores right now. But if they have that pink, right, that store should have the same pink of that a store in upstate New York would have. Okay, so we are trying to hit the same color palette, right? But what happens is we mix the colors based on yarn swatches, actually, and that's my way of identifying color. Okay, we'll send them a palette, maybe something like this. Okay, these are different palettes that we use. Okay, these are just colors that I like together, or that I see in a collection, and we send it to them, and then they have to match it. And they have like 4 different colors that they use to create all of these different colors, right? So they're going to match this. Now, why would I pick all of these tones together? Okay, what makes this a color palette? What makes this work into a batik collection? Do I need to always do, say, like this one, you can see it's very earth tones. What if I just did the earth tones up here, right? And I didn't put the green in. Is that a color palette? Is that something that could be for a collection? Absolutely. Okay, so a lot of it has to go with color, like I said, or we start with color. But I'm identifying what I think looks good together in a color palette, and that we can achieve in batiks. All right, so this is just a general color palette to start with, right? And I do look at color forecasting and color trends, and how we're putting things together in home decor, how we're putting things together in fashion. All right, and that's maybe a start of the color palette. Another start is, okay, what's the motif? What are we doing? What are we starting with? Obviously, these are earth tone kind of colors, right? Maybe I'm going with something with leaves, or with grass, or with, nature, or something like that. I may be tweaking it just a little bit, okay? But if you look at nature, you have a lot of different colors that are mixed together, and you'd be surprised. A lot of high contrast, actually. Especially, I'm thinking New England right now in the fall. New England in the fall it's very sharp contrast when the leaves are peak season. Is that citrus green that's up against the bark of a tree, okay? That's a very high contrast. A lot of times we think of the leaves or the changing leaves or something like that as all earth tone kind of palette, and it's not. It's a lot more high contrast when those leaves are at peak or have the high color of the pigment in them. All right. So anyway, your color palettes. Okay, so now I've got a color palette, right? This is a color palette. I make sure I have some neutrals. I've got more creamy neutrals, not a high contrast neutral with this particular earth tone palette. All right. But now how do I translate this into a batik, right? Here, like I said, the Spectrum collection, you can see, this is by Jessica Vandenberg. You can see how it's got the white on one tone, right? So it's a white and then one tone of color, right? White and one tone of color, all right? So it would be back to this thing here, our neutral in one tone of color. So the motif, I choose the white or the neutral and then one tone of color. And it depends on how saturated I want. If you look here, you can tell a lot of these are very saturated, whereas this one, these tones right here aren't as saturated. This color right here, obviously, in saturation, you can see what I mean. This tone right here isn't as saturated as this right here. Isn't as, it doesn't have as much volume. How about that? Is this particular orange. This one is softer, and sometimes we refer to that as pastel, but pastels can also have a lot of volume or be very saturated. All right, so the Spectrum collection has a lot of those contrasts that we love, okay? And it has more of a contemporary feel to it because of the motifs, but because of the use of color in there. We've got some interesting hand painted as well. So we've taken the black and white, right? And then we hand painted some of the motifs there. And we did it here as well, all right? But again, the saturation of color it's not that saturated in that particular collection, all right? So then what we're doing is we're assigning the motif color and then we're assigning a background color. One tone in the motif, one tone in the background. Or maybe 2 tones in the motif, 2 tones in the background. What about 3 tones in the motif for the background? Okay, we can get into that as well. So when I'm using a palette, and I'm using a palette like this, I start to think of, okay, what do I want to do? In this collection, Home Sweet Home, it's going to be in stores, let me see, September of this year. Okay, so you guys are having a sneak peek here. All right, so look at this right here. I used one color, or actually there's 3 colors in the background here, but it looks almost like a tone, one tone. It's the gray blue, and then I used a warmer gray as well, okay? And then in the motif, I chose a few of the colors from my color palette, and obviously it didn't look exactly like this. It was a brighter palette. But I used a few colors from my color palette for the motif, and I mixed it with my neutral. See how light it goes? Okay, it goes really, really light. So not only did I make sure I had non-saturated, but then I had some saturated colors too, and I put that in the motif. So then here's another one. The neutral, or the white, is in the motif, just like we did with Spectrum, okay? And then in the background, I did a lot more color there. And this is what I'm talking about, the saturation. You can see, like, this gold here is pretty saturated, right? You've got a lot of saturation of color with that gold in there, okay? And same with the pink, and same with the orange in there, all right? This one right here. How did we do this? Again, color. The motif is more of a one tone, 1 or 2 tones in the leaf. And then the background, I played with a couple different tones of color. I didn't do high contrast in the background here. I did more purple and pink together. Okay, and so when you do that, it kind of looks like, okay, that's orange on pink. Well, not really. If you got to look closely at your batiks and see how many different colors are mixed in there. But it all starts kind of like with a palette like this, okay? It's a matter of making sure that you have your palette together so it can be one collection. So you're not choosing all the colors of the rainbow to try and fit into one collection. Because if I say to you, okay, that's gray, how many different tones of gray do you have in your palette? I have at least 105 grays, okay? So there's warm grays, there's cool grays, there's light, there's dark, there's medium, there's blues, there are bluish grays, there's kind of a greenish gray. Every single color has that kind of mix depending on what other colors you're adding into it. All right. So when we're doing a palette, we want to keep it within a collection, right? We want to give something that blends together. Now, why do I do collections? That's something a little bit different with batiks. So they all go together. So you would put them together. Okay, and then we break it down even more, like this one with Home Sweet Home, where we've done colorways, all right? The magenta colorway. So that's the main phrase, I guess you'd say, of this particular colorway. The main color going through it or weaving through it, the magenta works really well. And then we've got a pop of this right here, our shadows, so it just pops it a little bit, okay? Home Sweet Home, look at this. These are mountains, actually. Okay, isn't that interesting how I used just a triangle shape, but to me they're the mountains with the columbines. Okay, and our cameraman almost fell over. Oops, sorry about that. All right, so anyway, this one has more of a butterscotch. It's got that color going through it. All right. And this one has more, it's more the pastels, all right? Can you use them all together? Absolutely. We do it all the time. But when you're showing it, and you got to remember, we're trying to show these to quilt shops and trying to get them to understand my message, right? As a designer, what I was thinking, because a lot of times they go, what in the world was she thinking with this? We put them in different headers, and it just makes a smaller story or more sense, right? Oh, these all go together. That's an easy way of putting them together, and they work in a project, okay? Look at this one. Look at the vibrancy of the tone in this one. And all that is, that's the reverse of this. Isn't that interesting? Okay, it's a reverse of it, but it looks like two totally different SKUs or two totally different colorways, right? It depends on how you apply your color and choose your color. So that's a little bit about color today, and I showed you two different collections. One Spectrum that's going to be in stores soon. Make sure you shout out to Jessica Vandenberg, So Many Creations. She has that collection. That was her palette, her designs. And Home Sweet Home will be in stores this fall for the rich multi tones that we all love as batiks. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions, if you want to look and see how color is applied, because that's a whole nother ball game, right? That's a whole nother thing. How do I apply the color? Do I do big balls of color? Do I do, contouring kind of thing? Do I do more of a flat or a dip dye? All of those different kinds of things. We put a lot of different color applications on my YouTube channel. So make sure you check it out and join, and you can see all the different ways we apply color for batiks. So you're in the group Karen Gibbs for the Love of Batiks, and I appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.